The angel was in a form, and he stood in the place that he could be identified. I am not sure we know the form of an angel, but he could be perceived and seen, and was realized by Zacharais that he stood in the presence of a holy man of God. Do you realize that that was the first visit from an angel to human being in 500 years?
Yeah.
And thus the panic set in, verses 18 to verse 25. Notice it says in verse 13, "But the angel said to him, Do not be afraid, Zacharais, for your prayer is heard." Now, different preachers take different views on this, and you can go different ways on this. So we asked the question, what was the prayer that the angel had heard, or the Lord had heard, from Zacharais? Depending on what commentary you read, you might come up with 3 or 4 different kinds of prayers. Our first thought was that he was praying about the matter of having a child. Well, you know, it probably had been 30 or 40 years, and they had come to the conclusion that why pray for a child if I'm 80 years old? Why pray for a child if I'm 45, 50 years old? And I'm sure that in the past they had prayed for a child because not having a child was considered a disgrace. And when a wife was barren, it was considered that God wasn't pleased with that woman. And so they went through that stigma for a long time. Well, I'm sure in the past they had prayed, but at this moment in time, after years of that not happening, it is probably that though he prayed for it, probably at this time he was praying for the long-looked Messiah to come. He probably had been praying, and I'm sure that he was praying that because he knew the Old Testament, and every person that was of any amount of spirituality would pray, when is the Lord coming? You and I do the same thing. You and I pray, when is Jesus coming back? And people have been doing that now for 2,000 years, right? And so he said, when is the Lord coming back? Well, on that very special day, the angel said, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John. And we learned that they did not have a child, and he had been praying for a child, as it were. And the angel said, your prayer has been heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear a son, and you will call his name John. Now, this would have been a miracle for Elizabeth to have a child. Notice in verse 14, and you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. God was stepping into human history. God intervened in history. You're going to be glad, and the disgrace of not having a child is going to be over, and your friends will be glad at the birth of your son John. But I have something more that I want to do through the life of John. It's going to be a blessing to you, and your friends will be happy. They're going to be confused, but they're going to be happy when a 70-year-old woman has a child. Now, they're going to be happy, but they're sure going to be shocked. Look at verse 15. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink. He will also be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb. Verse 16. And he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Lord their God. Verse 17. He will also go before him in the spirit and the power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. And we saw last time what the angel said about that kind of man John was going to be. Now, verse 18. And Zacharais said to the angel, "You have got to be kidding." Would you like to repeat what you just said? Did I hear you say that my wife is going to be pregnant? Let me run that back. Aren't you glad for TVs that when you can't, you can run it back? And what do they say? When you don't hear something been said, you can take that remote and run it back. And you can, now what do they say? And if you can't read something, you can stop it and read. There was a letter that we couldn't read because it went so fast, and we actually stopped the television on that spot where that letter was, and Charity read that letter. That it just zipped through it. And Zacharais said, "Would you like to run that through one more time? Don't you know that I'm an old man, and my wife is well advanced in years?" Now, let's see Zacharias' distrust response. Zacharais said, "Just how shall I know this is going to happen? Can you give me a sign, like the angel is going to lie?" Like he said, here's this angel, this messenger in his radiant glory, and he stands before the curtain of the silent sanctuary in all its awesome beauty. One would have thought this would have convinced the old man of the truth of this strange messenger. He's inside the Holy of Holies. One place you don't want to lie is inside the Holy of Holies.
Right.
You know, you really don't want to lie inside the church.
No.
Outside the church, okay, but not inside the church. That's not the time to lie.
No.
Well, Abraham in Genesis chapter 15 and Gideon in Judges chapter 6 saw and listened to an angel. And they both at first doubted. But you look, they did not receive the consequences or the rebuke or the punishment for their lack of faith. And Zacharias was, however, condemned. Now I thought that was interesting. Verse 19. And the angel answered and said to him, "I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God, and was sent to speak to you and bring you these glad tidings." So there. I'm Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God. The other angel, Michael, you remember, and they seem to be God's appointed angels, and they were to be connected to human race and with their end. Gabriel is a special messenger of good news, and he came to David to tell him of his restoration to Jerusalem. And Michael came to Daniel because he's at war with Satan. So Gabriel and Michael are standing in the presence of God, gazing. Their eyes was on God, or on the throne. And they stand around the throne, anxiously waiting for God to nod and tell them, "I've got a job for you to do." They are ready to dispense immediately from the throne of heaven. And when God said, "I want you to go down to Zacharais." Now, I don't know where heaven is. It's up. I don't know how far it is, but it's up past the third heaven. Yeah. And Zacharias was in the holy temples in a very small town, in a very small place. And God says, "I want you to leave where you're at, and I want you to sail down and go." I don't know how long it took him. I don't know how fast an angel can fly. I don't know how fast it goes, like on Star Trek, you know, or how fast they can move. But they were ready at the command of God, and their eyes was upon the Lord. Well, Zacharias didn't believe the announcement at first. Well, at least he doubted it. "Well, who do you think I am? I am Gabriel, not your common visitor, you know. I am standing in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and bring you this good news." And we know there are 10,000 times 10,000 angels.